the title we came up with was Begin with the End in Mind. And of course, we're here to share about raising children. And I think pretty much everybody knows us. Some of you maybe there may be some things we don't, so I'll just go ahead and say some common things that probably need to be thrown out there. We we have 3 children. They're all grown. Gabe, Brock, and Jacqueline. Gabe is married, of course, and Nirvana and him, my oldest, are having are due to have a baby here. So we're joining the next, moving on to the next stage of life. We have a middle son, Brock. Of course, he's severely disabled, which has a huge effect on us. And then our daughter, Jacqueline, our youngest, and she's in nursing school, and we're just very proud of her as well. Our situation may be very different than your situation, and I think that's kind of to be expected. I don't think that there is a set, this is what parenting should be. I think that's very unfair because every child comes in many different forms and many different situations. All our backgrounds are hugely different. So we're going to basically share about our family situation. Of course, we weren't perfect, and none of us are going to be. That's why we do these things. When we were parenting during those ages, we, of course, did a lot of these things because we need it. We still do, as we move on to our next stage of life. Our talk is based on Ephesians 6. Don't be harsh with your children, but teach them in the way they should go. Of course, as we were joking beforehand, our kids are grown now. We moved past that, but you guys are all in that stage right now, and it's a huge. I remember it. It's a huge responsibility. I mean, it's just. I remember when our first child was born, I was just like, "What in the world?" I mean, you can go to all the classes in the world and see everything done right in the world, but when it's put in your plate, and now you're up for the 3rd night in a row because your child has got teething or colic, and you're having a bump with your husband, and now we're certainly in the COVID. I mean, life just does not come in a square package at all. And, that's very intimidating. Many influences on us, hugely. I think I mentioned, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but, we have a disabled son. In our situation, that has weighed huge on us. And Susan and I, as parents, see it very different. And each one of you, like I said, are going to be in very different situations. But as parents, to collectively, I think it's important to know which way to go. Because even though we have this very, life can be complex, our families can be complex, we as individuals come complex. Most of us haven't been married when you're in this stage, and your children are younger. Been married many years, so you're still figuring things out with your job or your marriage, and you're doing what you're planning, but then you throw parenting on top of that. But at some point in time, we have to figure out, and I think too, I need to mention too that I think most of us here are coming from a context of we're in a church environment. We're trying to raise our children to be disciples. Some maybe, I don't see all the faces on this video, so I don't know all our backgrounds, but I'm going to say most of us are in that category. If you're not, I think that's the reason I'm explaining that. Our end game is to get our children to become disciples, and so on and so forth. But in other words, we have to deal with our backgrounds. I think Susan and I, our backgrounds are very different on how we were raised. And so now we have children we had to figure out. It took a lot of communication and a lot of, and also too, we're walking into an environment where, our kids are in an environment where there's not good parenting out there. We're introducing in schools or situations where our background a lot of good parenting is not evident. So we're having to deal and navigate through a lot of those pressures. I think for us is, it was important for us to define qualities and characteristics as a common ground. Some of that may be kind of sad. Like I said, we may think, okay, the end game is to our kids to become disciples. We kind of know some of that stuff. We want to be good kids, but we really don't know what that means. Nor have we really, put that on paper per se and figured out what that really actually means, because a lot of us come from different backgrounds. We have different ideas of what it means. So some of us, it might be just a well-obedient kids that listen on the first time, or they're pleasant, they wear nice clothes, whatever that may be, whatever that envision is. We all come to the table with different envisions. So there are a lot of discussions have to be taken. I will say this, and I think what's really important, what's the advantage that Susan and I have is looking back is, this is a reminiscent period of time, is that I will say this, and this is a tough thing to hear for maybe some of us, but our end game is not just our kids to become Christians. Now, is that super important? Is that should be a focus? Absolutely. Absolutely. But, statistically, all our kids won't become Christians. Okay? At a time that I should preface it by saying the timeline that we want to put on them. God has different plans. I have a very disabled child. We love him to death. We are so grateful to him be part of our family. Did I ever envision when we had a child, our first child or second child, that we'd have a disabled son? I never crossed me. So my point is that God's going to send us through different paths as parents that we may not feel very prepared for. He is preparing us, and also to maybe not on timelines that we have. So let me just close with this, and then I'm going to hand it over for Susan because we got time here. Is that, for us, our kids, we wanted them to be, we wanted to define our family values. And the values we wanted were to be kind, generous, capable, spiritual, confident. These are all these notes, so I'm going through it. You can download them. Contributing to the community. And each one of our children are vastly different in that process. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
So, just to summarize, we need to teach our children in the way they should go, and we have to determine where we want them to go, right? We all have individual values and family values and priorities. So when we're thinking about what we want to teach our children, one of the things we have to really determine is our family values and what qualities and characteristics we want to teach our children. Those things don't just happen serendipitously. A lot of it has to be taught. So what I see in general, and again, just to reiterate, Dan and I have not done it perfectly. It's much easier to look back and think about what we should have done than sometimes what we did at the time. So some of what we're sharing is our own experience. Some of it is the woulda, shoulda, coulda that we've learned over time. So in general, what I typically see are two types of parenting that we can provide our kids. One is reactive and one is proactive. And you stay with me. In reactive parenting, you're going to hear lots of no's, lots of stops, lots of threats, and lots of bribery, right? And there are times when that's necessary. If your kid's going to run out in the street, you're going to scream no. It doesn't matter how many parenting options there are at that moment. You're going to have to just stop them from going out in the street. Or if they're going to touch a hot stove, same thing. So there are times for reactive parenting, but it's not where we want to live as parents. As parents, we want to live really as proactive parents. And that requires us to be fully present with our children. And, one thing that Dan and I noticed is technology is such an incredible distraction for parenting. And you have to really figure out how close your technology is going to be when you're having your parenting moments. If you feel like your kids are constantly distracting you from phone calls and texts and YouTube videos, you're probably on technology too much. But it's super important if we're really going to train our children in the way that they should go, that we be perfectly present with them as much as possible. It's good parenting doesn't happen accidentally. It's very purposeful and mindful, and it's really something that if you want to raise good, healthy children, you've got to really pay attention. So one assumption that I have for all kids, and I think this is absolutely true, that every child is a good child that wants to please us and wants to get along with other children. So our question is, what is preventing them from doing so? I think if we operate from that standpoint, we'll always believe in the best in our children and then really work hard to give them the skills to be the people that they want to be, that we know they can be as they grow. One important thing is to really understand child development and understand kids' social and emotional development, because sometimes they're frustrated or behaving badly because our expectations aren't realistic. So I sent a link, Ayumi's going to put it in the chat, that just talks about social emotional development for children and what your expectations should be for different ages. If your child is frustrated a lot or disappointing you a lot, that's the first place I would go, is are my expectations realistic given their development? Because it's unfair to expect more from them than what they're able to give us. So the other thing is, what about your child's self-regulation? And we're going to spend a few minutes on that, because as I was thinking about parenting, self-regulation is got to be key, because most of the behavior that we're wanting to mold and shape into something different is because of difficulty with self-regulation. And that could be a whole class in and of itself. OTs are great at self-regulation, so that might be something Hortensia would want to do at some point in time. But there's also a handout, it's called the Zones of Regulation, that Ayumi can send you if you email her. But in a nutshell, our kids all have different levels of self-regulation. If you had a child that was a fussy baby, had trouble soothing, trouble going to sleep, trouble staying asleep, then probably self-regulation is going to be more of an issue as they go along, because their bodies just don't have that regulation naturally. If your baby's quiet, relaxed, easygoing, then self-regulation is probably not going to be as much of an issue for you. But self-regulation is something that we all have to learn, and it's a process. So if we're expecting our child, they're running around like crazy at a party, and then we say, stop, sit, they're going to have trouble with that because they're wound up already. If your child is having a screaming Mimi and you're trying to talk them through it and discipline them in the middle of that, it's not going to work because they're out of any zone where they can even take anything in. So I'm just going to go through briefly the zones of regulation. So if a child is in the red zone, they're already way up over the top, and it's not a good time to try to do anything but help them calm. So that could be sitting in a car seat. If you're at the store and they fall apart, go back to the car, sit in the car seat, let them calm down. If you're at a party, you're going to pull them aside, you're going to go for a walk. You're going to just get them out of the situation and give them a chance to calm down. Now, if they're in the red zone, they're going to kind of come down through stages. So they're going to go from red to orange to yellow and eventually to green. But you can't start disciplining them once they hit orange, or they're going to go right back up to red. Okay, they're just not ready to take anything in yet. So if they're in the red zone, but your job is to calm them. If they're in the orange zone, then they're already pretty wound up, and you better intervene quick, or you're going to have a meltdown, or you're going to have a behavior. So when they're in the orange zone, then you're going to be getting eye to eye with them, talking them down. Maybe you're going to have them come take a break with you or have a snack or a drink, but you're going to change the environment and help them to get back into the green zone. And if they're in the yellow zone, then maybe they're just coming to a party, they're super excited, they're super wound up. The yellow zone is a great time for front loading. So let's say they're on their way to the party, they're really excited. So on the way, you're gonna remind them of the rules when they get to the party. So they've heard what your expectations are before they are already wound up to the point that they can't listen. And then, you know, the green zone is ideal. The green zone means they're calm, they're alert, and they're ready to learn. So the green zone is the optimum time for teaching our children. The blue zone means they're sad or they're tired. Those are great times to reinforce positive, to let them know how much you love them, but it's also not a great teaching time. So our goal is to really optimize the green zone as much as we can. So what are some typical green zone opportunities? Those would be family times, family devotionals, eat times, meal times. Green zones usually happen within routines that they're familiar with. Again, driving in the car on your way somewhere is a great time for a conversation. They're contained in their car seat, you're driving, great time to do the teaching part for them. And again, those moments are only going to be their best if you're 100% present. If you're, you know, if you're talking on the phone or in between phone calls or, you know, trying to find your way to somewhere, it's probably not going to be a great learning opportunity. It's those times when you're completely present with them. The other thing that's going to optimize the green zone is routines. Kids really need routines. They need to know what exactly is expected of me. If they understand that, then they relax and they can work within those routines. So it's great to teach within routines. Morning routines, mealtime routines, bedtime routines. Bedtime routines, I think, are one of the best times of every day. And what we tried to do with our kids is stagger their bedtimes. So each one of them had a bedtime routine where we were wholly present. We were just theirs. And that included a bath, which helped them calm down, a story time, which was fun bonding time. Bedtime routines are also super great for just reflecting. You know, maybe you've been a not great mom today. Maybe you've been very impatient and grumpy, and that's a great time to say, you know, I was not my best today. I'm really sorry I was grumpy and I wasn't patient. And if they've had a bad day, maybe you're going to talk about what made it a bad day. Or if they had a great day, you can say, I appreciate so much that I know this was really hard for you and you did it anyhow, and you made my life so much easier today because you were obedient and you were helpful, and you know, all that stuff, reflecting. And then their prayer time is an opportunity to pray about all the things you guys just discussed. And then that gives them a routine they understand. It's a cool down period that helps them to relax and get ready for bed. And that's a great way to end every day. So the other thing is within routines, you're probably going to have better luck in terms of obedience. So if they know what the expectations are and these expectations are repeated every day, then it's much easier for them to comply and work within the routine. If you don't have those routines established and the expectations aren't clear, you're likely to see more behaviors. And that's going to be true in novel situations too. If they're in brand new situations or with brand new people or just things that aren't typical for them, they're more likely to get their self-regulation is probably going to be challenged more, and they're going to have a harder time. Just some general teaching ideas in terms of behavior. Give choices where you can. Children from the time they're 2 years old are trying to establish, I'm a different person than you. I have my own ideas. I have my own opinions. And if you don't honor that, you're going to definitely have the terrible twos. If, on the other hand, you give them choices where you can. Do you want to wear these shorts or these shorts? Do you want to have macaroni and cheese or a sandwich for lunch? Do you want to watch this show or that show, or play this game or that game? Or do you want to go to the park, or would you rather, you know, go for a walk? Whatever. The more choices you offer them, it does two things. One, it gives them a sense of control and power that, hey, I am my own person and I have my own ideas. And it also builds their self-esteem because you're saying, I know you have an opinion, I value that opinion, so let's try that and see how it goes. That can be true even when you're playing a game and let's say you're doing the cars down the ramp and they don't want to put the car down the ramp, they want to run it up the ramp. You're like, oh, that's an interesting idea, let's try it that way. Oh, you know, do it their way for a while and then go back to down the ramp. So it's just a matter of really respecting that they have their own ideas and opinions and giving them the power to have those ideas. Another thing that if you're trying to teach a new skill or a new behavior, it's called backwards chaining. So let's say, for instance, you're implementing that they need to pick up their toys in their room. Initially, you're going to pick up the toys with them, and maybe they're going to, 1 out of 4 toys is going to be the one that they put away. Then it's 1 out of 3, then it's 1 out of 2, and then they're independently putting their toys away. And this varies greatly, again, depending on self-regulation. If they're super tired, if they're, you know, if they've had a really rough day, if there's been lots of, you know, you had the tension at school, whatever, then their ability to do these things independently is going to vary. So be okay with, if you see they're having a tough day, help out a little bit more, lower your expectations a little bit. You still want them to be responsible and you still want them to be successful, but you've got some variance in your expectations in that situation. The other thing is the first then contingency. So first we're going to do this and then we will do that. Countdowns for transitions. If they're doing something that they really love and then it's going to be time for dinner, 5 minutes until dinner, 3 minutes until dinner, more minutes, and then we're going to be all done. You know, give them some time for transitions. They can't, just because you have in mind what's coming next, they may not have that in mind. And to expect them immediately just to drop what they're doing and then do something different is very challenging for them. Also, pairing non-preferred with preferred activities. So let's say your child hates sitting in a car seat, then you're going to have a bag of toys that are only available when they're sitting in the car seat. And when they get out of the car, they're put away, they stay novel, they stay special because they're only available during that difficult time. Or a transition object, something that they can have during those transitions that helps them get through it. The other is natural consequences. And, you know, in our lives, we face natural consequences, don't we, as adults? So the more we can use natural consequences with kids, the better it's going to work. So for instance, in the morning, you have an hour to get ready for school, right? So you tell your kids, okay, here are the expectations. Here's our morning routine. If you get it done in 45 minutes, then we'll have 15 minutes for you to play your game. If you don't get done, then there won't be time to play the game. Okay, so then if they're ready, they get their reward. If they don't get ready, the natural consequences, there wasn't time for them to play their game that day. So the more you can incorporate natural consequences, the more they're taking responsibility for what's happening and the better that will go. Just in terms of behavior overall, I should have Eric speak about this, or there's what we call the ABCs of behavior. There's the antecedents, there's the behaviors, and then there's a consequence, right? So what our job as parents is to look at what's the antecedent. So what happened before the behavior that created that situation? Was my child tired? Was I impatient and in a hurry? Was there something else affecting them? I think sometimes we have to figure out kind of what the triggers are for our kids. And then we can make a much better plan in how we're going to deal with the behavior. As much as possible, if you know what causes the behavior, you're going to try to intervene before the behavior happens. So let's say, for instance, your child by 9 o'clock at night, if he's not in bed, he's crying, he's whining, he's miserable, and life is going to go badly. Then you want to make sure he's in bed before that time as much as possible. Or if he has to stay up, he has his blankie and he has his juice, and you've got a movie on so he can quietly go to sleep if you're somewhere where he can't get to bed on time. So it's a matter of figuring out what happens first and then deciding the best way to approach the behavior. How am I doing on time? Okay, I've got 2 minutes left, so let me say real quickly, I think frequently behavior has a lot to do with self-regulation. Also, if your child is a little bit delayed in their speech, meaning that their brain is working faster than their mouths, then you're likely to see behavior because they have an idea or a thought or a plan and they can't get it out and they get frustrated, and you'll see behavior because of that. You're gonna see behavior if your kids have slow processing speed. So if your child just can't take it, you're talking, and they got the first sentence and then you lost them, you're gonna see behavior. So if you're seeing that kind of behavior, just shorten your expectations. Instead of saying you need to keep your hands at your side because you're gonna say quiet hands. So keep your commands simple if their language development is simple. Give them time for the transitions, and then acknowledge when things are difficult. So if a child hates to get in the car seat, they get in their car seat without a fight, you can say, I know you don't like the car seat and you are doing such a great job. I know this was hard for you and you're doing a great job. I know you hate this. We're gonna be done in 5 minutes and then we're gonna do something else. So always remembering to acknowledge their struggles. Okay, I'm done.
Obviously, parents involves a lot of mechanics. I think for me, transitioning here, I want to talk about what I think kind of more of an ethereal standpoint. What I mean by that is I think that one of the things that for me as a parent is just have a global picture of where my kids are. I think because sometimes as kids, they can have seasons of, you know, good days, bad days. We as parents have good days, bad days, a good semester at school, a bad semester, you know, maybe 1 year is good. They have different challenges. But I think it's sometimes to kind of always gauge where our really children are at, because too, I think of our kids, you know, we're talking about the 0 to 11 years now. There were some, I mean, semesters, some years in school, some seasons of their life that were really good and some weren't, you know? And so as a parent, where do you gauge that? And to me, that was always, as I think that pretty much everything in terms of your kids needs to be centered around your family. And I think it maybe it can be think, well, that's kind of obvious, but it's got to be your first community. And what I mean by that is I think that one of the things looking back that I think we really did well with our kids, we did some things not so good, but I think one thing we always focused on is our kids are part of our family community first. And I think it's really important because each one of our child, that means something different. Obviously, we had three very different children. You know, Jacqueline was the type to go down the hall, you know, close the door, and she'd spend the evenings there. You know, and that was her way of living. And okay, so, you know, we had to pull her out of her room. And, you know, Gabe, of course, was in the front room throwing things and, you know, just doing different stuff. But, you know, we made sure that our family, we had a very different situation than probably many of your families. We had Brock. But Brock was very much part of our family. You know, it's funny because, you know, even when some of you know our families real well, we went through some very tough seasons. And, you know, even when the paramedics came to our front door, Jacqueline opened the door and explained to the paramedics what was going on as we were in the front door, you know, probably doing CPR. And some of us are thinking that's just horrific. Yeah, that was horrific. And most of you will never experience that, but that was our family and we still had to function. And so our kids had to really feel at home in this very difficult situation. Some of you might have blended families, may have difficult situations that it's your family and it's got to function well and it's your community and they need to be part of it and they need to own it and they need to have a vision of how they're part of it and they're loved and they're cared for. Everybody had a role. You know, I think that we made sure that, and I don't know, some parents may disagree with us and that's fine. Maybe it was our situation. But even from a very early age, I mean, I'm going to throw this out there and say by the age of 10, our kids were doing their laundry 100%. Now, some of you are like, whoa, and maybe that was just our situation, but our kids were pretty much by 10 years old, 100% doing their laundry. Maybe it's our background. With support, but they did it. It's not like, here's my pile of laundry, I'll come back. It's like by that age, they had dibs on the washing machine. I think we pretty much had a good understanding of how to do chores, not just like take out the trash. It would be like, you're making spaghetti tonight. Now, that's not a 5-year-old task, but I think the point is that, and I know we've had some parents saying that's crazy. I don't know. That was just how we ran it, but I look back and that I'm glad our kids felt equipped, and because your next transition is going to preteens and teens, and of course now as an 8-year-old making spaghetti, it's not going to be exact, but they had responsibilities and they know how to do it. They were building towards that end game. I think the second thing is church community. They're part of our church community. And I think that one of the things that I think that when we look at our kids, we have to have a vision of where they're at in that. Too many times it's so sad. I see, kids in fellowship or in church sitting there on your computer and where everybody else is singing and being part of things. I know those are just bad days that we all have, but I think have a vision for where your kids are, looking out for friends, having sleepovers, building those relationships. Our children need to know how to build relationships, and the church is a prime place. I know I got a couple more minutes, so I want to finish this. One of the things that I think that, reflecting back, I have mixed feelings on, but I think it's super important, is our life skills in our community. I think, obviously we have the advantage of looking back, and I mentioned some things about how our expectation for our kids was. But one of the things was that I think that so many kids nowadays, which we weren't perfect in, but I felt like we had a pretty good handle, at least in this area, is that kids had a good expectation of how to work hard. I see that as a real problem, and later in life, kids having problems. I think, like I mentioned before, our kids have a good understanding of cleaning, cooking. We have people in our house on a regular basis because of Brock, our caregivers, and they're wonderful. And sometimes I think I see how some of those components were totally missed, and that's okay. They ran their house differently, but I know for us, we made that. I think Susan wanted to say, you want to summarize, Brad? Oh, the other thing too is technology. It is very different now than obviously when our kids were younger. But I think we hit it more in the teen years, whereas if we're talking about the age group we're talking about right now, is you're hitting it right now at a very young age. All I can say is get educated, learn how to manage it. If you're not good at technology, that's okay, but you can't not be educated. And you're going to have to learn I'm not a psychologist, and Sue can go in that, how the brain is developed, and there's a lot of studies out there, and some of you guys are shaking your heads. You know exactly what I'm saying, is you're going to know more than I do in this. But from a parenting standpoint, be involved, healthy habits. I know, and technology is also a great thing because they're hooked on it. They are locked into it. They're wired into it. That is their life. And so to learn how you can be locked into it, it's part of our lives too now. So I think you'd be very wise to understand it. I think understand the dangers. There's some great upsides, but understand the dangers as well and be involved as a parent. So
to summarize, we want our kids, all of us want our kids to be contributing members of society, right? We want them to be active in their communities. And the first community that they're going to be active in is in their home, their family community. And that means that they have responsibilities at home. That means that other people are going to take care of them at home. that means a real sense of community. And then as they get older, we want to expand that community into the church community. So we want them to help pick up toys in Kids Kingdom. And if there's a new kid in class, we want them to introduce them around or stick with them if they're feeling insecure. And we want them, and I think this is something that we did right. We were very mindful about who we wanted our kids to get to know, families we wanted to be involved with, friends. Dan and I had been in the teen ministry, so we understood that we would hit a point in time where we would no longer be the greatest influence in their life, their peers would be. So we worked very hard to make sure that they had great friendships, not just when they went to church, but outside of church, families that we camped with, vacationed with, traveled with, had over for dinner, designed play dates for. We were very mindful of setting up those opportunities. And some of those turned out to be not the best friends they could have had, but some of them turned out to be friends that are still their friends, that are great influences on them. So we were very thoughtful about that. So just to summarize, our goal really is to help our children to be capable, spiritual adults that have the foundation that they need to be able to become the people that they're going to become. They're all going to be unique. How they express themselves is going to be different. How they express their strengths is going to be different. But that's our goal for all of our children, is to provide that foundation.
One of the questions was, how does self-regulation work with ADHD?
A lot of what Susan was sharing about was collaborative parenting and really knowing your kid before anything happens. And I think that's one of the key factors that we've really learned about ADHD in parenting and in coaching, is just getting to know your child. Kids with ADHD have a really hard time self-regulating most of the time. They have difficulty transitioning to different things. It is a much bigger conversation. But in short, know your child. Figure out what works for them. What Susan shared about when they're being asked to do a task that's a non-preferred task, something that they really just don't like doing, cushion it with something that they do like doing. It just really helps with the motivation, and it gives them something to look to and to help regulate. But using those zones of regulation, the red, the green, the blue, the yellow, and just working through that, it's just really great advice and something to hold on to. You can't do anything in a crisis when they're just in that mode. You have to bring them back down to green before you can do anything. And it might not even be in that same moment. It may be an hour later when they've really worked past that. So that's all I can say for right now.
One thing I would say is backwards chaining is really great in those situations. So if you've kind of watched your child and you know that 45 minutes into a party, he's gonna get in trouble. He's gonna do something. He's gonna get in trouble because he's over the top. And that's the time to kind of always plan that around the 45-minute point, you're going to pull him in for a snack or to take a rest, or, you know, help him regroup for a minute. And then you're going to have to watch again. Maybe he's going to be good for another half hour, and then you're going to see those signs, and you're going to pull him in again. So until they learn it internally, then you kind of have to observe it externally. The other thing I would say is that occupational therapists specialize in self-regulation. So if you've tried all the tricks in the book and you're still really struggling with it, you should really have an occupational therapy evaluation specifically looking at self-regulation. Because sometimes they don't know what's going to help them calm down or feel better. And a good occupational therapist will give them a bunch of different activities. So that's another idea.
We have 2 questions that came in, and I think they're pretty similar. So the first one was, how do you teach a 3 to 4-year-old that not everything is a competition? Similarly, there was another question that said that this child can be extra competitive even with their parents. And so based on what you said, would it be right that we should just trust that it'll grow out of it? What do you think? And so both kind of deal with competitive nature.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Practice makes perfect. So that's a great opportunity, is to play games in the backyard, play board games, and teach the social rules of the game. That you got to be happy when somebody else wins, and it's hard, but you still got to give them a high five because they did a good job too, or whatever. But those are hard concepts even for us, right? If somebody else gets a promotion or somebody else, you know, that's tough. It hurts a little bit. So it's learning to manage your hurt and be happy for the other person at the same time. So practice makes perfect. Board games, yard games, practice makes perfect.
Or you can just beat them all the time as a parent. I'm just kidding. That's not
well,
good. Not good. Don't take that.
Well, and the other thing I was going to say is perspective taking. You know, when taking a minute to say, well, how do you think that they feel because they won or because they didn't win or whatever, helping them to look at things from another person's perspective is helpful too. But only when they're in the green zone.
So really quick, if we can answer, I wouldn't say any questions simple, but the first one is, we notice our child is more obedient and respectful with other adults instead of us as his parents. How do we help our child obey us?
I'll start with that. And by saying, you know, you're right, there's no simple answer. You're going to have to get to know your child. I think someone's made the point is obedience means many different things. You know, especially in the world of disabilities. I mean, I'm not saying your child has a disability, but what I am saying is we know so much now where we didn't know many years ago. That's because disability world has opened that up. Chances are there's many times things going on with your kids that we're responding because we're either frustrated, impatient, or we're kind of being selfish, quite frankly. That doesn't mean we shouldn't expect obedience, but take a hard look at what you're trying to get your kid to do and why are they not responding versus they just need to obey. Does that help? And then I'll turn it over.
Well, first of all, somebody told me once that how your children obey with other people or how they behave with other people is a better indication of who they are than how they behave with you, because there's so many other things that are tied into their relationship with us. A lot of times when kids are giving us a hard time, if we haven't had that concentrated, present, I'm right with you time with them, then they're going to get your attention any way they can. And disobedience is a way that they're definitely going to get your attention. So I would kind of look at that and see if maybe there isn't a component of that. I know when my kids were little, if I was trying to get something done and they just weren't listening, kept needing my attention, what I would do is I would just stop. I would go sit and play on the floor with them for 20 minutes. I'd get them started on a game. We'd play together. I'd be eye to eyeball with them for a few minutes. Then they could engage in something independently and I could go get something done. But sometimes that disobedience is just a sign, hey, I really need your attention here for a few minutes. And if you give it to them, then that's going to improve a little bit. So sometimes there's other things tied into how they behave with parents, and you have to kind of sort out what that is. But if you're behaving well with other people, that's a very good sign.
The last one was, how do we help our kids to sit down to eat meals, brush their teeth, etc.?
Well, I think that's a great opportunity for natural consequences. Here's your food. It's now dinner time. At such and so time, I'm clearing the table and we're putting everything away. And if that means you're hungry till morning, I guess you'll be hungry till morning. Or it could be at 6 o'clock, we're going to watch this show together. If you're not done eating, you'll stay in the kitchen while the rest of us go watch the show as a family. Natural consequences. But the reality is, if a child refuses to eat, there's nothing you can do to make them eat. So getting in a battle over eating you're not going to win. So again, those natural consequences, what's going to happen after dinner, if that's something you really care about, you need to sit down and eat your dinner is probably the best advice I could give you on that one.
And we weren't big fans of forcing our kids to eat. It was just like, okay, well, and then later when they got hungry, it's like, you didn't want to eat. You know what I mean? That's kind of life. I mean, you start with those early lessons of, somehow we're programmed to think that our kids have to eat when we tell them to eat. And, we're not in a starving nation, at least in our homes.
Right. No, thank you so much. That was super helpful. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today for our parenting class. Stroebels, thank you so much for what you shared.
Thanks for having us.
I'm really grateful for it. And so let's go ahead and we're going to pray, and then we'll finish our time together. Father in heaven, thank you so much again for this just incredible time. It's so encouraging, God, to be with parents, that we all want to be the best parents that we can be. And I think that's just a big part of the battle, is keeping our heart to want to be the best that we can be, and continuing to honor you, to honor our marriages, our spouses, to be unified together as a spouse, and to help our children continue to grow. And I just thank you again for just the wisdom that Dan and Susan shared. We're very grateful for it. And I just pray that it could produce a lot of fruit in our parenting. We love you so much. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.